Hey, welcome to the Academy 99 podcast. I'm Bradley Grinnan. This is Chris Lee. Chris, do you have anything to say for yourself?
Just happy to be here, buddy.
You're like, yeah, when I get a chance to say something for myself, Brad, thanks.
Right. That's funny.
I'm going to jump right into it.
Send it.
When I do this, 50% of see, I simply jump right into it, and then I'm not going to. You'll see me. I edit these things, and I don't do a great job at it. But since it's kind of a pet project right now, I'm going to edit it until we pass it off to somebody else. And which means I just go, whoop. When I'm doing this, I do this a lot. 50% of the time I'm thinking, right? The other 50% of the time I'm thinking as well. So I guess that's 100%. But 50% of the time I'm thinking about what we're talking about. The other 50% of the time I'm thinking about my insecurities and limitations.
At least you're honest.
Well, so I'm going to give you a classic example. I just made that joke about, when I give you, the opportunity to get a word in, which is anybody in any kind of relationship with me. Yeah. So that just now I went like this and I was thinking like, God, you talk too much, man. You should just shut up and listen to people more.
Yeah.
And I know all about inner dialogue, but this actually segues into what we're talking about. But I still have to remind myself not to crap all over myself. And sometimes that negative inner dialogue still holds truth. Maybe I do talk too much. Maybe I do need to shut up more. That's accurate,
I think there's something to that. I think there's a way to be in constant self-reflection and constant, maybe not criticism, but desire for improvement. But you can do it gently. Like you can talk to yourself as though you're somebody you actually care about,
Yeah. Totally agree with you on that. So what's that have to do with today? So I firmly believe that this is going to sound so basic, but there's lots of layers to this. When there is a thing you want to accomplish, an action you want to perform, a quality of life you want to live into, you can say attain. Sure. I feel like we can give 100 different descriptions. None of them really fully encapsulate the 99th percentile. And so for you and I and anyone who listens, 99th percentile, that actually, but to hit that 99th percentile, there has to be a non-negotiable continual return to whatever it takes attitude.
Sure.
That whatever it takes, I'm going to figure it out. Whatever it takes, I'm going to do it. And I have to be reminded of that often, which is why I have people other than me who believe that. Some of them are friends. Talking about you, Christopher Douglas Lee. Some of them I pay to remind me that.
Yeah.
And I'm not paying to have friends. This is, therapist, coach, mentors. But this idea that I don't think people tap 100% into, at least, people I've worked with, they have it in some area of their lives and they tap into it sometimes. But I don't know that they even see it before we start working together as something that you can call upon at any given moment. That no matter how hungry you are, how tired you are, how down you are, how depressed you are, that you can tap into, okay, whatever it takes, and then begin reverse engineering, or as Coach Chris Lee says, backwards planning to get to the place that you want to be operating at.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a lot of talking on my part. I'm not even sure if I said that clearly. So I'm going to pause and let you reflect.
Yeah. The first couple things that came to mind were this idea of sacrifice. I don't think people use that term correctly. Um, Ayn Rand, like my favorite philosopher, she differentiates between sacrifice and investment in regards to achieving something, or she defines sacrifice as the trading of something of great value for something of lesser value. And when you're pursuing greatness or you're pursuing something substantial, I would argue that the things you may be giving up or the things that you're putting off in order to achieve that greatness isn't a sacrifice, because you're pursuing something of greater value, and rather it's an investment. And like the example that comes to mind is Michael Phelps, like the most decorated Olympian ever. He did he sacrifice all those parties in high school and college, or did he invest in himself early on to achieve the thing that he actually wanted? You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
and kind of coupled with that, I saw this cool video the other day. um, I think it was a Buddhist monk actually was talking about some people just have this iron will that no matter what, they're just going to do whatever it takes to do the thing, to achieve whatever it is that they're trying to achieve. And some people don't have that iron will. They need something else to help lure them along the path. And I think a majority of people kind of fall in that category.
I'm a majority of people.
Yeah, samesies. But he did,
I don't know that you are, man. I would put you more in the iron will category.
maybe a little bit of both. But I like
okay, fair enough.
I like the way he describes this, because he says that for him personally, he doesn't have that iron will, and so what he requires of himself in order to pursue and to stay consistent with the things that he's chasing is really just this vision of the future for himself. And that is what is like drawing him towards the actualization of the individual that he's trying to become. Some people, maybe Michael Phelps would be a good example of the iron will. He just every day, no matter what, hit the pool and did his work. Some people need to constantly envision the kind of individual they could become in order to, I want that more than I want to stay in bed or whatever,
Yeah. And this is why I say there's lots of layers to this conversation. One, because there's lots of layers to most conversations. But like if we take the Michael Phelps example, he had the whatever it takes attitude to accomplish what he wanted to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
And then the question, and he's answered this, and this is documented because he spiraled. The question becomes, well, was it worth it? Was that investment or sacrifice worth it?
Yeah.
It's specifically for his mental health.
Yeah.
Which is always Nick Peterson, continue. I feel like every time I talk to him, he said this: there's no sense in running a race that you don't want to win. And sometimes I think people start running races, they think they want to win.
Right.
But then they look up and they're like, this is not where I want to go. This isn't the race I actually want to be in, which is totally okay. Switch races, I would say.
Yeah.
And there's a lot in there. So, and it's not, we'll pull it apart because
sure.
What else are we going to talk about for the next 30 minutes?
Right. But, there's dudes that come to me, and I've mentioned this before. They come to me like 17, 18, 19 years old. They're like, dude, I want to be an operator. I want to be a Green Beret. I want to be a SEAL, MARSOC, whatever. And I'm like, cool. And we chat for a little bit, and it becomes very evident very quickly whether they like the idea of the job or they like the job. And those are two very different things. And and kind of going back to the Phelps example, do you like the idea of being the most decorated Olympian, or do you actually want to be that? That's really only answerable by the individual, right? But I think you're onto something. I think a lot of people start off on races that they don't really want to win. They just like the idea.
They like the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. I talked about, like, I like the idea of writing a book until I helped a couple people write a book. And I was like, why would I ever want to go through that?
Right.
Um, so that's totally agreed. And I think Michael said he did want it. It
Yeah.
wasn't the idea.
Yeah.
He wanted it. And it
Right.
also broke him on some levels or
Sure.
in the process, you know.
Mhm.
And hopefully he's at a good place today. He seems to be in a good place today.
Yeah.
What is whatever it takes? What's that look like?
Mhm. I think whatever it takes is really it's a question more so than a statement. It's more like, am I willing to do whatever it takes? Is the desired end state worth it to me to do whatever it takes? Because anybody can say whatever it takes until it's actually costing you things.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that, and what I say often to folks I work with, as you chase excellence, one of the biggest common factors that I see across the board is people come to me like, there's nobody around me with my mindset. And as a result, social circles start to shrink, and connection starts to diminish because there's nobody on the same path as you, or very few on the same path as you, you know.
Or you feel completely misunderstood all the time by almost everybody.
Exactly, which can feel very isolating.
Yep.
Because people just don't get it, you know.
It's a brilliant question. Asking yourself, am I willing to do whatever
Yeah.
it takes?
Yeah.
Most people aren't. I'd say,
Right.
that's why they're not in the 99th percentile.
Right.
I believe most people aren't. Now, I don't have data to bake that up. Bake that up? Back that up. I can bake up lots of things. I hate baking, though. I'm much more of a cooker. But anecdotally, in my experience, most people don't.
Right.
And I think I was working with a young lady who, she wanted to. She was starting a business, and this is years ago, and she was starting to work through, and she kept running into all these things that she was saying were, this is impossible to do. This is impossible to do because of her lifestyle and her parameters. One of the things that was really important to her, because she was in her 20s, was mid to late 20s, was her social calendar. She wanted to be out with her friends. And so she started negotiating with herself. Well, I'll go out with my friends, 4 nights a week, but I won't drink, which turned into maybe not drinking once a month.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But for her, and this is okay, if that's what she wants, like, I want to emphasize that's okay. But
Yeah.
then you don't get the business success. You just
Right.
don't get it.
Right.
And anyone who's been in business or started a small business completely understands what I'm saying right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So, not to get it to the place where it's sustainable, where it works, where you're not that statistic, where you're the other 4 businesses that shuts down within the first 5 years.
Right.
So, but that wasn't even when I said, well, what if you have to give that up? Well, I can't give that up. I like my friends. I like going out. I like having a good time.
Right.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
So let's just be really honest. You're not willing, for honest, you're not willing to do whatever it takes.
Right.
And you've got to decide, is that okay or not? You've got to decide, how bad do you want this? So that's, I think most people are in that area. And I find myself in that area more often than I want to be. And that's just a heart to heart. If you've got 2 hearts all by yourself, right? That's just, hey, how bad do I want this?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not willing to do whatever it takes. At
Right.
least not right now,
Right.
And I can give you 100 examples of that in my own personal life from the past.
Yeah. Yeah.
What else does it look like? So I love the question, am I willing to? Because at any given point, and I love, for some reason, this just inspires me and jacks me up, believing this, because I wholeheartedly believe this. At any given point, you can ask yourself that question and change everything. And that sounds dramatic, but it's true. You can ask, am I willing to do whatever it takes? And if you answer that yes, and begin to act upon it immediately, and no matter how you're feeling, no matter what you're doing, and that might just mean drinking 32 ounces of water immediately, taking a hot shower, doing a cold plunge, going to exercise, cleaning a room, and all of a sudden it feels like you're back on top of your life again. And I'm talking about, some of the most successful people feel those feelings at times of I suck, or this is not a good day.
Right. I think there's a couple things there. First off, I think whatever it takes is a learned behavior. It's not, well, I'm just not that kind of person. It's not like, well, my mind just doesn't work that way. I disagree. I think in the right circumstances, you would absolutely be that person. And the first thing that came to mind was like, all right, you're stuck on a deserted island and you are alone. Are you going to do whatever it takes to survive? Yeah, you are. You're going to figure out how to build a shelter. You're going to figure out how to start fire. You're going to figure out how to acquire food, and you're going to live.
You and I are.
It's whatever it takes.
Yeah, I'll argue some people won't.
In my opinion, it's a learned behavior that can be developed and a skill that can be practiced and fine tuned. Now, in order to fine tune that, I think a good exercise an individual could do is, instead of just sitting there saying, yeah, I'm going to do whatever it takes, get out a piece of paper and write down all the things you're willing to either let go of or give up or postpone, and make it an extensive list. I'm talking about like, all right, I'm going to postpone starting a family. I'm going to give up drinking. I'm going to give up going out and partying with friends. I'm going to give up, whatever, watching TV, whatever, make the list rather extensive and then look at it and digest it and say, all right, am I actually willing to do whatever it takes?
It's a great exercise. Let's break that exercise down, because that's what I like to do. There's going to be a few things on this list. One is, what am I willing to give up right now?
Mm-hmm.
Like, just give up.
Yeah.
2 is, what am I willing to postpone?
Yeah.
3 is, what am I willing to start doing consistently?
Yeah.
4 is, what do I want to be willing to start doing? And what do I want to be willing to give up? Mm-hmm. And the reason why I think that category, can you think of anything else that needs to go on that list?
No, I think you hit the heavy hitters for sure. No.
The reason why that last one is so important is because that's probably where the majority of the work is going to be. Is to go back to your monk, finding the right carrot and the right stick to push those into the categories of, now I'm willing to do this daily. Now I'm willing to postpone this. Now I'm willing to give this up.
Yeah.
Or at least that's how things are.
Napoleon Hill's book, for me, Think and Grow Rich,
is if I don't identify those things, I end up just lying to myself about, I'm willing to do this. No, I'm not really willing to do this because I haven't done it yet.
Right.
Or I'm willing to give this up. Not really, because I haven't given it up yet. So if you can short circuit that pretty quickly and get that down, then okay, this is where I'm going to have to seek outside help for sure. Really do some searching for carrots, really tap into the future vision of yourself, etc., etc.
Yeah. And Napoleon Hill does this in his book, Think and Grow Rich.
Mm-hmm.
He begins with like, visualize yourself where you want to be, like specifically financially, but it can be used in any endeavor or any area of life. But he's like, all right, picture yourself exactly where you want to be. Give yourself a deadline, write out the date and the time, and actually feel the emotions and feel like you're there already. And now list out all the things you're willing to give up in order to get there. And then list out all the things you're willing to do to get there. So he does it really well, and I think it's a good exercise to engage in, because it kind of answers all those questions, like, where do I want to be, what am I willing to do consistently, what am I willing to give up in order to make sure that future happens,
Yeah. I remember when I first read that book, I was like, I was in my early 40s
Mm-hmm.
reading this book going, how come nobody in my life for 40 years told me about this book?
Right.
And it's a little archaic, but I love Old English. I love Shakespeare. I love Beowulf. I love reading Beowulf and trying to figure out
Mm-hmm.
what is he saying there. I didn't care that it took me forever to read it when I was in high
Yeah.
school. I was
Yeah.
like, this is amazing. But yeah, it's such a great book.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with
Agreed.
Psycho-Cybernetics. When I first read that, I was like, how come nobody told me about this book earlier? Which, by the way, is why every one of those books where I've said that to myself, my oldest has read. Like when I hear, I'll give you $20, read this book, write a report.
Yep. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
So um, let's, I'd like to peel back more layers around what are the things that keep us from um, doing whatever it takes, because sometimes I think there are these insidious things that we don't recognize. This is the classic limiting belief insecurities of not believing I'm capable of doing what it takes to accomplish, or to hit that 99th percentile, or to hit that life fulfillment, or to hit that quality of life, or believing, like you said, I'm just not that person. For example,
Right.
if if you are convinced you're a night owl, which means your best work is done from midnight to 3,
Mm-hmm.
if that's true, whatever it takes looks like designing your life so midnight to 3 is when you're doing your genius work, or confronting and seeing, do I need to create a new story?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
or the layers behind, I keep saying layers. I don't know what this is about. But the story behind, oh, I'm not an outgoing person, so I could never, meet people. I
Right.
could never go to a networking function and connect with people. All of that stuff. Because sometimes it's true, and so we need to cater to who we are, and sometimes
Right.
it's not true, and then sometimes it's somewhere in the middle. I
Yep.
know you've got thoughts. I can see it.
I think it goes back to, I think you're right. I think it's a story we tell ourselves, because we were actually just having this conversation before we started recording. Is I feel as though my mind is most motivated in the evening or at night, uh, and maybe that's because it's the time where I'm calm and I'm sitting down and relaxing, and that maybe it gives my brain the opportunity to fire appropriately.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think it's a story I tell myself, and it goes back to the question: what are you willing to do to make whatever it is happen? And maybe that should include change the story you keep telling yourself. Um, and if people say, yeah, I'm just not disciplined enough, you're right. That is a story that they tell themselves, because discipline is just like a muscle you can train. Um, or maybe they'd say, I'm not outgoing, or I'm too introverted, or I'm just not a morning person. All these are stories, that we tell ourselves, and things that we have the opportunity to change if we so desire. And if the thing that we want most is worth it, then that change should be relatively easy. That
You'd
change,
think.
and that you would think. And if it's not easy, then how bad do you actually want the thing, whatever it is,
Yeah, and I do think that for this is where I love to get into some of the deeper work.
Yeah.
You would think, oh, you really want this, so why don't you stop this behavior? But to use like an addict as an example, well, if you're an addict, it's not going to be easy, and it's
Right.
not just a question of how bad do you want it. It's, you know, your classic, just for like your classic 12-step program. Well,
Mm-hmm.
there's 12 steps of heavy labor
Right.
going inside, healing trauma, making amends, and getting okay with who you are, so you're
Right.
okay being sober.
Right. Right.
So you're
Yeah.
just okay with who you are.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
once that work's done,
Yeah.
I
I
think it
think you're onto
becomes
something there for sure.
easier, right? But this is where I always am talking about we learn patterns when we're young that serve and protect us. And then when we get
Right.
older, we're stuck in those patterns, but they're no longer serving us or protecting us. In fact, they're probably
Yeah.
creating some
Yeah.
damage in areas in our life that we don't necessarily want, but you're so locked into that pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And once you disrupt it, it can become easier, I think, for sure.
Sure.
Anyway, I'll pause there.
Yeah, I think I read a book a while back called Owning Your Own Shadow. Actually, let's see.
On the shelf. If it's on the shelf, this is like a golden medal moment right here.
Yeah. Owning Your
Not to
Own
put any
Shadow.
pressure on you.
Yeah, by Robert Johnson. Anyway, he has an interesting take on shadow work, and it's been a bit of a buzzword for a couple years now, popularized by like Carl Jung. And the shadows is I guess broken down in like, terms that I can understand, is the shadows, the parts of us that we're maybe ashamed of or scared of, the things that we shove down way down deep because, quote unquote, like they shouldn't be on the surface. But that particular book, Owning Your Own
I
Shadow.
love that phrase, by the way.
Yeah. Owning Your Own Shadow is cool because he says that the parts of us that we're maybe afraid of are actually where a great deal of creativity and inspiration can come from. And so at the end of the book, he describes, the light and the shadow as two circles that are converging and making that Venn diagram. So that almond shape in the center, and that centerpiece is where like you can really live because you're living in the light, but you're not afraid of the shadow parts that are being revealed and being discovered. And he says the goal is actually not to eliminate shadow, but actually move those circles so close together that they're overlapping. And so that mandorla, or the almond shape of the Venn diagram, actually becomes one whole circle. And so you're totally incorporated as an individual.
Give an example of that, bro, if you can.
I think one example would be like, I shouldn't be angry all the time, and so you shove that way down deep, and so you try to pretend that you're not angry, whereas in actuality it's like, where's that anger coming from? Why am I angry? And you dig into that, and then the further you dig and the further you understand what it is that is making you so angry, maybe it's injustice you've experienced in the past, maybe it's expectations that were not met in previous relationships, etc. But the more you can dig into that and not be afraid of that, or not be ashamed of bringing that up to the surface, the more you can be okay with being angry, because now you understand why, and now you understand how to actually better manage it, because it's it's not random things that are triggering you, so to speak. It's rather, it's like, I know exactly why I'm angry right now, and I'm going to tell you why. And the cool thing about it is, he says, the more you're able to explore the shadow and dig into it, there is a great deal of creativity there that can be used to, make very impressive things. He talks a lot about various artists that teetered on that abyss of madness and creativity, and um, and
Certainly plenty of artists to pick from.
right, exactly, and that's his point. Is like true creativity. I think he argues that they really dug into that, the parts of them that were kind of scary, and that's where a lot of that inspiration came from. But kind of to our point, like whatever it takes, sometimes it's going to require you to explore the parts of you that maybe you're ashamed of or scared
Yeah.
of.
That
You know,
shame, that's a huge barrier for whatever it takes.
yeah,
Um,
agreed.
one of those, that's so classic, dude. I wish you always bring up the great things. When do I get my moment?
Dude, it wasn't me, it was somebody else's book.
Yeah, it's good enough that you talked about somebody else's book. For, one of those things we tell ourselves that isn't true is, I'm just not good at one of the things I used to tell myself. Oh, I'm just not good at relationships. I don't do relationships well.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Particularly like long-term monogamous, romantic, intimate relationships. And I remember going to see my therapist, and that morning I wrote down what was really holding me back.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of my greatest fears, that if this person that I'm in a relationship with truly sees who I am, really could see who I am and what's going on inside of here, they would run in horror away from
Yeah.
me. They would be
Yeah.
terrified and just bolt. And that's still something that I have to work through. But I remember that morning, it was the first time I came to that realization of, this is what I'm really afraid of.
Right.
And what that really means is, no one, not just this person, no one can see who I really am. Because if they do, I will die alone.
Right. Right.
And so there were lots of things I wasn't willing to do, like be completely honest, be transparent, be authentic, share my true feelings. All of those things make it impossible to relate if you were having to dance around, your own little Marion puppet of, this is who I want you to think I am, based on a lot of things, from how I
Right.
was raised, my relationship with my mom and dad, my relationship with my sibling, and what I think you want to see. And, I'm really good at dancing that puppet, until
Yeah.
you realize there's nothing there
Right. Right.
to even have a relationship with somebody. And then you're like,
Yeah.
crap, but I'm so good at it. I don't want to give up, So there's all those things. And it becomes, are you willing to do what it takes? And that shame. So for me, that's like the shiniest personal example I have for me of what that shame is, so powerful, because now
Yeah.
I have to accept how I view myself.
Yeah.
Now, lots of stuff there to unpack, but
Mm-hmm.
like, that's not true. How I was seeing myself wasn't completely accurate. It was definitely skewed, and shame does that to you as well.
Yep. Yep.
But I do think, for the most part, the whatever it takes barrier
Mm-hmm.
is almost always attached to something deeper. Not always, but almost always.
Yeah. I would agree with that. And kind of my, I don't know, my running maxim lately is, it requires a great deal of self-reflection.
Okay.
One should be constantly asking oneself all kinds of different questions. and often like, why do I do this, or why do I do this particular way, or why does this make me really happy, or why does this make me really pissed off, because the more you get to know yourself, the better you're able to navigate life, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, give me the Stoic quote.
I don't I don't have one off the top of my head, but
What? You're like my own personal daily Stoic.
I mean, Stoic philosophy I've really gotten into, mainly because it's helped me, I think, manage expectations on life. And no Stoic has said this, but I think Stoicism boiled down could be this: if the things you don't have control over, which is practically everything, you shouldn't give a whole lot of mental bandwidth to, because you don't have any control over it.
Yeah.
In reality, you only have control over your thoughts and actions. And people even argue with me on the thoughts portion of that, and I push back pretty hard. Like, you do get to control your thoughts. You may not be able to control what pops into your head, but you can control if it stays there, or if you're going to replace it with something different, or how you respond to it. So if all you can control are your thoughts and actions, then you should be really intimate in understanding where all those thoughts and actions originate from.
Yeah. He's not a Stoic, but you mentioned him, and I'm a fan. I found so much insight from Jung. But he's got a couple that come to mind right away. This is about self-awareness in yourself about other people, that basically everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves.
Right.
And
Right.
why that is right here for me all the time is anytime I'm getting irritated with a younger person, particularly a younger male, I almost always know that is attached to a behavior that I used to run, or a pattern I used to run that I'm ashamed of.
Right.
You
Right.
know? And so his Jung's other one is, and I'm going to butcher this, but it's about the visions that you have about yourself. They only clear up when you look into your own heart.
Yeah.
There's a second part of that about looking outside, but I don't know what it is. But basically, if you want to get a real clear vision, it's got to be this internal reflection of what's really going on with ourselves. And denial ain't just a river in Egypt cliche, but it's true. It's until you get really honest with yourself, you're always going to have that whatever it takes barrier keeping you from doing whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Jeez, dude. So we just got so deep.
I like it.
Yeah. I can't help it. That's all I do. And this is why our friendship works well, because then you'll say, like, sometimes you just need to do the thing. And I'm like, yes, I totally agree with you. And that's accurate. And you can white knuckle for a while. You can force for a while. It's not long-term sustainable. Anytime I find myself white knuckling, that's an indication to me I need to do some self-reflection in this area. How about you?
Yeah. Accurate. Because you're right. I think the white knuckling is essentially a Band-Aid, but it's enough to get you going.
Yeah.
It's enough to get you started on the path. And I've said this before, sometimes the right answer to get started is ready, fire, aim. And that would be an example of that. It's like, all right, I don't know what's going on, but I just need to do the thing right now. And then through that constant self-reflection, you can start to dial in exactly what's going on,
Dude, do you like tell your sister, hey, call me like 10 times during this so people think that I'm like
right,
popular? I'm just busting your balls. Yeah. So whatever it takes can be tapped into at any time.
Yeah.
I really believe it can. And it doesn't matter if you're 19 or if you're 67, like anywhere in that range. You can go younger, you can go older, just random ages.
Yep.
You can tap into that. Asking yourself that brilliant question, am I willing to actually do whatever it takes? Sitting down, doing we'll call it the Napoleon Hill exercise. I call it some other things, but we'll call it the Napoleon Hill exercise for this conversation. And making a list. By the way, there's one whole conversation we should have about putting stuff down on paper.
Oh yeah.
Because
that's
like
huge.
I mean, the amount of really successful people I have to say this to blows my mind. And I have to do it because I'm not smart. I don't have the IQ of some of my clients of like, have you put that down on paper? No. Okay. Question.
Right.
If you're doing a proposal for a $1.5 million budget approval, is all that going to be on paper? Yeah. Okay. Right. So why isn't your health or your relationship with your son down on paper?
100%.
It makes it real, gets it out of your head. That's a whole other podcast episode. But
absolutely.
So getting that all down on paper, and then being willing to do the self-reflection to embrace your shadow. And I love the Venn diagram of making that almond whole.
Yeah, exactly.
A great book, Untethered Soul.
Yeah.
By Michael Singer. A lot of good practical application for dealing with the discomfort of really being honest with yourself.
Yeah.
And just sitting with that stuff and realizing, oh, it felt like a white hot poker was coming through my chest, but I'm still alive. Okay. And now those feelings have passed and I'm okay.
Right.
And then continued self-reflection. What did I miss? How's that for a recap?
Dude, that's a pretty solid recap. So, well
I'm
done.
actually impressed with myself. Chris, final thoughts.
Final thoughts are, don't be afraid of the self-reflection, particularly the parts that maybe you're scared of or ashamed of in your life. Figure out why. And that'll help you along your path towards whatever it takes.
You win. I feel like you win every time. I feel like you win every round. Maybe it's not a battle, Brad. Maybe it's not a fight. Maybe that's what your problem is.
It's not a competition.
It's not a competition. It's a rivalry, though.
True.
I just muttered a bunch of curse words in my head at you. That's not my problem. I mean, I've got problems. Don't get me wrong. I got plenty of those. That's not it. Appreciate you, man. Really appreciate you. If for no other reason other than the 11, maybe 12 views that we'll get, the conversation's always good for me. Like this is what we talk about when we talk about having people in your inner circle that aren't afraid to have conversations.
Absolutely. No, this has been solid for me, so I appreciate it.
All right, man. Let's go get on another call.
Let's do it.
Business meeting. Talk to you later.
Later, buddy.